Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. So, I wanted to go on and finally do a legitimate Star Wars project. Because, yeah, I did some Mandalorians and books of Boba Fett's, but really, it kind of got to the point where I really didn't enjoy those projects enough because I felt like they were missing something, which is really just the Jedi element of a story, which I like the most. And at some point, I am to probably, if ever going on and wanting to do The Mandalorian again, like I would have to just wipe the slate completely clean of all that and redo it all over if people are very much interested in me covering The Mandalorian on here. But again, complete overhaul, wipe slate clean, not going to go on, and definitely not going to go on to use any of the prior footage I had on the other channel. I'm not doing any of that. No. Of any of the Star Wars stuff. None of it's coming over here. Um, it just won't happen. But so, I know a lot of people will probably say that Star Wars is a lot more impactful through its animated series, as well as also its video games. There's a lot more lore, there's a lot more in depth. You go on and you play like Star Wars The Old Republic, or yeah, The Old Republic, and eventually they go on to explain why the lightsabers are the colors they are. They go on and force you to build for a long effing time by having a blaster to then when you finally do get a lightsaber, you're like, oh my god, oh! Like, just, I want a nut so badly because of how, like, I really had to work to get this freaking lightsaber. And then the sequel, they go on and seemingly, like, I think they give it to you right away. Man, did I really love, like, the dual lightsaber, like the two lightsabers on the end, and like the Darth Maul lightsaber. I really was to enjoy that in the game. But anyways, so Star Wars: A New Hope. This is to be a story that I think is to be the most memorable if you've even barely watched it. But also, I think it's the most iconic Star Wars movie of all. And how it's also just this simple coming of age story. And how this is all about kind of like The Last Starfighter, where Luke is just stuck in this farm, just looking out in the sky, just wanting to be out there. But he turns to his Uncle Owen and is asking him, it's like, well, hey, after this season is over, I'm going to go on and I'm going to go to the academy, right? And Uncle Owen's like, yeah, I need you for one more season. And Luke is like, well, you said that last year. And Owen's like, well, yeah, well, if I get money together, then I'll get new hands, and then you can go to the academy. So immediately Luke is like, I'm going nowhere. I'm going to stay here forever. I'm going to be a farmer for life. And so, coincidentally, Luke's life gets course corrected into what he's always dreamed of living, simply because of two droids. Droids. We'd come to find that two droids escape from a blockade runner and have a princess be captured and tortured and put into a castle like Mario. But instead of it being a castle, it's a moon that is to be called a Death Star. And don't get me started about Alderaan. Don't even get me started about Alderaan. Anyways, so they go on that whole mission to get to Alderaan. Just a kablooey. Really? Just a kablooey, that Alderaan. Anyways, so we would we would see both C-3PO and R2-D2 that crash land onto Tatooine to eventually separate and rejoin one another in this sandcrawler to be guests of Jawas. Kind of forcibly guests, because they're going to be sold for slave labor or whatever. So, at some point, we would, of course, have Luke and Uncle Owen go on and purchase these droids. And then all of a sudden, as Luke is fixing them up, he all of a sudden notices that there's a message for some guy named Obi-Wan Kenobi. The name kind of sounds familiar, but not all of it, as Kenobi is to be a guy he knows named Ben Kenobi. And it's like, well, relative? Cousin? Is it just a common name, Kenobi? I don't think it is. Doesn't sound like it. So, Luke doesn't think anything of it because he goes to his Uncle Owen, and Owen is just going to like, just erase the droid's brain and just have them go on and get to our farms, because that's all we paid them for. But the R2 unit won't let things go. To where now Luke has to go on and figure out where R2 is, because of how R2 is to be adamant about finding Kenobi. So, Luke risks his life in the sands of Tatooine. I guess he didn't fall into the weakness like his father of, God, I hate sand, it's so coarse, it just gets everywhere. Yes, Anakin, we know how much you hate sand. And it's so weird. Maybe that's the reason why Ben went to the location he did, because like, hey, is there enough sand here? Can there be more sand? Anyways, so maybe that's why Vader would have never gone on to look for Kenobi there. It's like, no, sand, oh no. F that noise. So, we have Luke that goes after R2, and in a scuffle of Tusken Raiders, we have Luke joining up with Ben, and Luke is to go and speak with Ben about Luke's father and being able to be given a lightsaber. And also, I think that the Skyhopper that Luke had in the beginning of this was also to be given by Ben without him knowing, as a gift, because you can see somewhat of this in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show anyways. And you could also see Ben with a young Leia also in that show, and kind of there's some preamps to what is to eventually be this movie, which was kind of really fun to watch, as well as also Ben on Tatooine kind of interacting with Jawas and having things go missing, and he'd have to go on and have to really buy back his stuff because they kept stealing from him, because they steal everything. So Ben meets up with Luke and gets the whole entire message coming from Princess Leia, explaining how she has a bit of plans and intel that Vader was looking for on the Barricade Runner. And so now Ben is wanting to take Luke to Alderaan. And Luke is like, yeah, I can't do that. My parents aren't dead yet. Like, I have responsibilities. I need to be a farmer. You're just telling me to just drop everything and just help you out. That's a little bit strange there, Ben. Like, so hopefully you don't know something I don't. So as Luke goes with Ben to eventually come to find that the Sandcrawler had gotten destroyed by not Tusken Raiders, but Imperials. And then Luke goes on to make his way back to his homestead to find everyone dead there. And so Luke then turns to Ben. It's like, okay, I'll go with wherever you want because I have nothing left for me here. So Ben and Luke go to the cantina after there's been some times where Ben has to kind of have to use his force powers to persuade the weakened minded to eventually say that they're not the droids they're looking for and that they should be able to go about their business. So, I also really like this movie for how they well explain the Force so early to where once we get into all of the other films, it's just showing more of the complexities of the Force because we probably don't get enough of it in these films. So, we have Luke going with Ben to the cantina. Yeah, we get that music a lot. So, as Luke and Ben get in a little bit of a scuffle between a guy named Cornelius and Ponta, eventually Ben starts making his way through a number of pilots and eventually stumbles upon Chewbacca, as we'll come to find in prequels that there has been some interactions between Yoda and Chewbacca within prior films, so Ben may know Chewie very well. Chewie. Anyways, so Ben goes on to speak with Han Solo, and eventually they strike up a deal where Han is realizing that Ben is seemingly in some kind of trouble, and if anything, he's going on and he's offering, like, well, hey, I'm willing to take you to where you're going because I have a fast ship. Believe me, I have a fast ship. I have to go on and thoroughly explain the castle run I'd went into and all these other things to tell you how fast this ship is. And then eventually, when Luke and Ben make their way to the ship, it's like, this is a hunk of junk. But Han is like, it's a fast ship. So Han goes on and asks for 10, and Ben goes on and is to say, it's like, well, I'll give you 2 now. And I think he ends up saying, like, 13 after the fact. Like, the details are kind of lost to me a little bit because I watched this last night, as well as also I have, like, tons and tons of pages of just character names that are just databased in this brain from after seeing it once or twice and having to memorize that all. So, after Han goes on and is to be questionably shooting first, he goes on to meet up with Ben and Luke onto the Millennium Falcon to get the heck out of there as they're, of course, being shot at. So they get out of the docking bay, they get the fuck out of there, and so as now there is a bit of time to make their way to Alderaan, we then have Ben that is going on and training Luke about how to use the Force because it should be starting to flow within him because he doesn't even know that this thing existed until today. Now it really has to flow right through him. Man, hopefully, I'm very worried what he had for lunch because maybe it'll flow a little bit too much. So, what do you have at that bar? I'm curious. I know he had some milk at one point. So, Luke goes on and does this training remote, and the whole time Han is talking about his thoughts about the Force and how he doesn't believe in it, which is really interesting. Because eventually Han, within the much later films, I think will go on and feel very differently, in my opinion. Like, with Han eventually ending up where he is by the last bit of these movies, yeah, like, things tend to kind of soften up with Han quite a bit. Plus, I guess also maybe family does as well. So, eventually, as the Millennium Falcon finds that there is a TIE fighter and there is eventually them following it, they realize they get kind of tractor beamed and controlled into going into what looks like a moon, but then they find out it's a Death Star. We'd also come to find that Vader is going on into these conference meetings, and a lot of people are second guessing him. He goes on to torture Leia with this interrogation droid, and it doesn't seem like he's getting any answers out of her. So finally, they need to test the Death Star's real true power, anyways. So we'd come to find that the Death Star has made its way to Alderaan. It is now wanting Leia to explain to them where the Rebel base is so they can take it out. And Leia does give the answer, but Tarkin wants to go on and do a little bit of target practice with Alderaan anyways and wipe it off the bit of outer space. You can't say wipe it off the planet because it is a planet. So you're gonna wipe the planet off the planet. Anyways, so here's where Han and the Millennium Falcon make their way to Alderaan, realize that it's no longer there. Then they meet with a TIE fighter. They follow it and eventually realize that they are then forced into going into the Death Star. As Vader and a number of the stormtroopers are to go on and inspect the Falcon, we find that Han has some compartments that secretly hide him away. I think at some point they go on and they reuse these compartments at some point later on in some other movie, but that gets lost on me exactly what that one other thing is. So Han eventually spots some Navy troopers coming into the ship. They take them out, and then shortly after that, stormtroopers come in as Han calls for them. They beat them up, and then I think Han goes out as one of the Imperials are asking, like, "Hey, like, why haven't you responded? Why are you off of your post?" And the stormtrooper goes on and knocks his head, and he can't hear, or his comms are out. So now we get to the more exciting part where Han and Luke are running around as Ben is going on and deactivating these 7 reactors, so that way it'll kill the tractor beams so they can skedaddle out of there. As well as also, Ben is going to do a thing he's been putting off years, plus also he is to go on and tell Luke that, like, he's no spring chicken anymore. Like, he can't go on and he can't be doing this kind of stuff anymore. He can't be gallivanting anymore like he used to be. So at this point now, for Ben, it's now or never, and he has to hope at this point that he can take out Lord Vader, because I guess it's not Darth Vader. But anyways, I'll call it either way because it doesn't matter to me. And so, as Chewie, Han, Luke, the droids, they all get stuck into this one computer room, and R2 starts to go into the computer and starts to realize that Leia is with inside the Death Star. Well, Luke is like, well, like, I had to, of course, read the message with Ben about this princess, and we need to go and we need to find her. Plus, also, I think Luke was going on and saying how, like, beautiful Leia was and all these other things. So, also, like, why wouldn't you want to go on and why wouldn't you want to rescue a damsel in distress? Like, wouldn't anybody want to go on and want to have that fun adventure, even though it's risking your life? Maybe not Han Solo wants to do that, but Luke surely does. So, Luke and Han find that Leia is in this detention cell, and so they go after her with pretending that Chewie is to have been gauntlet up, chained up. He has these kind of cuffs on him. They say something differently in the movie. So they make their way to the detention cell, and I'm sure at some point I also didn't talk at all about, like, the force choke done by Vader, because he chokes a lot of people in this movie. Like, he chokes a good, is it 2 people? 2 people? He chokes Ramus in the blockade runner, and then he also chokes another one of his own commander guys that just keeps insulting him about his religion or his sorcery, and then Darth just kind of chokes him out. I don't have the exact name of that character on me now. I'll have it somewhere later. But yeah, Darth likes to do some of that choking. So, but back with the film here. So, they go to the detention cell after some hodgepodging of figuring out how they can go on and trick these people. Eventually, Chewie gets free, gets a blaster out, and blasting away. All these cameras have to get blasted out so that way people won't know what's going on. Han thrusts onto this comm center where he's trying to go on and explain to everybody that it was just like a malfunction going on, and that no one should come down there. And it's like, yeah, we're fine. How are you? Everything's okay down here. Like, we're going to send a squad up. No, like, we have a leak down here. A radiation leak. Don't come down. Yeah, they're coming down there whether you wanted to or not. Han screams out to Luke that they're going to be getting company soon. Luke goes on and opens the door to a Leia who looks at Luke and it's like, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? And it's kind of funny because I remember the Family Guy movie, The Blue Harvest, where they go through basically this whole entire movie shot for shot, scene for scene, but they do it in a much more comedic way, but not exactly. Like they make a lot of goofy, weird, fun references and stuff um, going on through that thing, and it's a lot of fun to watch if you've never seen it before. Blue Harvest. Uh, if I could recommend to anybody any Star Wars stuff, it would probably be more of like the video games. Uh, like for any of the animated stuff, you can just kind of pick that up at the start of kind of anywhere and follow along. But uh, like I think Knights of the Old Republic is a really good game to like follow up on. Um, I was to play like the Star Wars game on N64, and I found like a lot of ways to just kind of memorize a lot of vehicles by doing that. Like I probably wouldn't know who or what the Y wings are, and that they're bomber vehicles or bomber uh, spaceships if I never played that N64 game. So like it's very random what exact thing I would kind of lean you into as far as a piece of Star Wars content for a video game. Like I'd even gone to play quite a bit of like Force Unleashed at some point, so that was actually really entertaining also. To find out that Darth Vader had like an apprentice, so that's kind of an interesting story. Uh, anyways, so back with the movie. So Luke goes on and is to save Leia, and like it's funny how like she doesn't Leia pay attention to anything that Luke says until he mentions Kenobi, and she's like, "Oh, Kenobi! Oh, let's go!" like he goes on, he's like, "I'm here to rescue you," and she's like, one ear out the other. He's like, "Yeah, like I'm gonna rescue you. Like, come on, let's go." And then all of a sudden, he finally says Ben Kenobi, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, let's go then." like for some odd reason, is that still that like interrogation droid hallucination drug still within inside of her? So that's the reason why she just didn't pop up to realize that she could freaking escape. Did she not notice that that door is wide open and she could get the heck out of there? Speaking of door wide open, there is obviously a scene in here where stormtroopers are trying to make their way through this door, and one of the stormtroopers bumped their heads. And for some odd reason, they decided to keep it in. Maybe they didn't catch it when they originally caught it, but I think it also was just kind of this funny thing of like, how about we just keep it? It's funny. To where that little scene kind of became a meme that kind of got recycled whenever somebody would go on and kind of bump their head on something. Because it happens when people are kind of just not tell or not exactly figure out the measurements of some certain thing, and they pop their heads or they fall off a stage or something because they weren't paying attention or whatever. I don't know. So they ran out of the track. They ran out of room. They weren't paying attention. Anyways, so pushing on. Uh, so Luke frees Leia, and then we have to realize that now Leia has to free Luke and Han. They make their way back to this to the cell room hallway to defend themselves against stormtroopers. To eventually have Leia, who's to blast her way into this sewer drain to go flying into there. Chewie, of course, not wanting to do this, but Han pushes him in. We get to the trash compactor scene, which is very iconic for a lot of people. We'd have a monster that is within inside of this trash compactor, but I'll get into more details about it later on about what the name of that is. But anyways, so trash compactor scene happens. Luke has to call on C-3PO to free them. They do. Shortly after the track compactor happens, there's a bunch of just running and gunning around. There's some kind of fun scenes where Han is like running towards some stormtroopers to then realize he needs to run backwards because there's too many of them. He's overwhelmed. They're running all over the place. It's funny. If anything, a Star Wars film, I guess, at some points could be funny. So, with all this running around and grappling hooks and all these other things, eventually it gets down to where our group goes on and needs to make their way back to the Millennium Falcon after they've kind of regrouped with everybody and the droids are kind of making their way also back to the Falcon. And now Ben has to go on and face off against Vader while Luke watches from afar, to all of a sudden have the stormtroopers who are not paying attention to the Falcon, they're paying attention to Ben and Vader to see who's going to win this fight. Because they're getting out their popcorns and like, oh man, who's going to win this one? So Luke goes on and watches Ben fight Vader, and I'm like, yeah, get him, Ben. Slap him around a little bit. Come on, like, Anakin has gone on to always be the one that is like, yeah, better than you, and my power is doubled since the last time we met. Yeah, like, come on. Like, let's figure a way to just kind of slap Vader around a little bit. No, I like Darth Vader. What are you talking about? Nobody's slapping down no Vader. Come on. No, I'm just joking around. Maybe he'll get slapped around by some sand. I'm joking. So, yeah, it's funny. So, Ben is to realize that since Luke has made his way back to the ship, and Ben being able to use his force powers knows that all the people are back on the ship, as well as also Leia is in there. So it's like, all right. So Ben at this point is just a distraction, and he realizes that. So as soon as he knows the best possible time, he is going to go on and just lift his arms up. Vader goes on and cuts slices, and then all of a sudden Ben weirdly disappears. We'll come to find that that'll eventually happen to other people down the road that'll just weirdly disappear, and we're like, what? Like, that wasn't a big enough, significant enough death for me? What the fuck? Like, I guess they just had to overdrive their force powers to then just wipe themselves out? Like, okay, sure. Whatever, movies. Whatever you have to do to tell some really cool story. Because that was pretty cool, but I don't know. But anyways, so Luke and Han escape. They get out of the Death Star, and they make their way to the Rebel Alliance planet, of which they won't have exactly the name on me right here now. I'll have it later. They get the information about the Death Star's weakness. They find that there's an exhaust port that they can go on and shoot into, and it'll blow up the whole thing, because that's a really strange weakness that at some point in other sequels they just reuse that same exact weakness. They just try the exact same thing in another film. What is it that the Death Star never goes on and realizes that they should probably cover that up, do some adjustments? No, like, it's just the same freaking weakness from one movie to the other. It's just poor planning at this point. So Luke now has to go on and now work with this team of this Red Squadron. And Biggs is going on and selling Luke and all the guys like, oh yeah, he's a really good pilot. Like he's really good at what he does. And Ben is consistently telling Luke, search your feelings, Luke. Like, don't use the targeting thing. Just use your force. Trust your feelings, Luke. Fuck it, Luke. Just so so we go into the battle of the Death Star. So in all honesty, there's going to be a point of me where I'm going to try to figure out who the heck is who within the Red Squadron. I'm going to completely ditch and forget about the whole Gold Squadron. At that point, like I would just go on and just be like, okay, there's so much memory I really have about this entire film. So by the end of this, we would of course go on and have this all tying into Luke. There is a number of X-Wings that all get taken out. I think it ends up being Luke, Wedge, and Biggs that are left, I think, is the last three. It kind of winds down to that. So Luke is on the run. He, of course, goes on and hits the exhaust port, gets that out of there at full throttle, and he's being chased by TIE fighters or the Imperials. So, and I was so scared that at some point I'd probably go on and F up a name here or two, but I'm sure there's a more in-depth name about any number of these things I'm not getting into because I could not be bothered. Also, I completely did not talk about the whole Gunner Station Millennium Falcon thing. I'll do that in the whole other breakdown. So, Luke goes on, hits the exhaust part, gets the heck out of there, while Vader is flying in the atmosphere of space while the Death Stars who have been blown up. And Tarkin is like, yeah, I'm not going to go on and get my ship ready. Like, we're going to win. What are you talking about? Yeah, not so much. So, Luke goes on, blows up the Death Star, goes back to the Rebel planet to get a formal ceremony where he gets the Medal of Bravery. And Chewie doesn't get an award, but at least he gets the last line of the film. So with that said, that covers a good chunk of this whole entire film. I'm going to get into more of the details and the breakdown and basically everything I've already said already, but go into a tiny bit more detail. Even though also there's going to still be some names and such that I probably won't go on and mention because I don't have the freaking time. Because also I've already been speaking for 40 minutes anyways. Whoo! Yeah. So, Star Wars A New Hope, all to be broke down and all to be said within 40 minutes. But also I have to go on and talk about my feelings upon this movie. Search your feelings, Luke. And also give you my grading upon this film, how I felt about it. Obviously, this movie's on Disney Plus because it's a Star Wars film. So, my overall grading of this movie is I will give it a... Visually, this is an epic film. Visually. It is a little bit of a slow film for me, though. But the story is also I would say, to be overall, like, I want to say solid good or great. I'll say great. So, because for me, like, I honestly wished that they could have done certain things like what current movies do, where when we do quite a bit of planet hopping, they at least on some part of the screen somewhere tell you what planet they're going into. because Tatooine could easily get confused with Earth. Like any number of other planets could easily get confused with any like, and we get to so many different places. Mos Eisley, we get to all these locations and things in one film, and we're just like, okay, where is all of this? To where I feel like we need other films or other projects or other things to explain that later. And really, also, like with this movie, it is a very memorable film. So it's one of those that I don't really know if it has real rewatchable value. Besides you always loving the visuals of this film. And some people have probably watched this hundreds, thousands. They watch it every Christmas or something instead of the Christmas Star Wars special, which for shame on you for not doing so. For shame. Anyways, so some people may not even know what I'm talking about. The garbage Christmas special that no one really gives a wow. Anyways, so I think my overall grading of this movie is I'll go with I'll kind of cut in the middle. I'll say that this is a solid, great film, and obviously it's kind of having to be that anyways. Like I was kind of teetering whether I could just say that it's a, a solid, good film when I originally was thinking about this, but I'm just like, no, like if anything, like out of an entire number of Star Wars movies, this movie stands out the most. These early films stand out the most. And then also, all the other things kind of exist for people to either check them out or pretend that they don't exist. I like the prequels, and I had watched quite a bit of the animated stuff that was with Star Wars, but I can't exactly point out to exactly which ones I watched because heaven forbid, um, I kind of watched piecemeal things here and there. I didn't really commit to a whole series or something like that. I watched a good smattering of it, and I was really entertained visually by it. But anyways, so I don't know if I really should have even graded this movie because I think it's easy. Like, it's freaking Star Wars. Star Wars: A New Hope, but Star Wars. Am I gonna say that this movie is slop? It is stupid. It's the worst thing I've seen this year. No, it's freaking Star Wars. Um, maybe some of those shows will say have you say that, but like maybe not these movies. Well, the earlier ones. well, we'll see if all of them match up. We'll see which is the most hated one that everyone doesn't like. Looking at you, Last Jedi. Anyway, so or any of those other ones. Yeah, other ones. So let's go on and oh, I know that this one will probably not be the best Star Wars film out there. I know that there's probably a number of people that'll probably feel Return of the Jedi's or Empire Strikes Backs or whatever. Like they will probably go on and even be greater than this. And I'm going on and like really having a high uh, thing for this. Um, I also am to weirdly say, specifically for this film, I have not gone on and watched this enough. I really haven't. I watched it originally in its VHS, and then I watched it much later when they started to put all those additions, which I hated because I was a purist and I liked to have seen the original cut and not this added additional bullshit that they did later on, which was irritating and annoying to me, and it just added to my runtime for no reason. because honestly, I'm just like, I want the original cuts of all these films. I don't want any of the additional crap. I want a choice. I don't want to be forced to have to watch this extra bullshit. So figure out some way, Disney Plus, to go on and give me different cuts of this film if you haven't done that already, because I haven't really paid attention to that. Because believe me, I didn't really watch this on Disney Plus anyways. So, with that said, and obviously, I don't think I should have been even bothered to grade this film, but I did anyways, because I care. Yeah, if anything, I think the movie honestly gets ruined by its CGI'd additions, like the Jabba the Hutt scene, whatever. Like it just looks awful. But of course, they weren't gonna go on and give you a man in a suit and whatever. It's all gonna be done off a computer of whatever year that they did this additional scene thing from. The Jabba scene does nothing to add to the film more than Han's scene with Greedo, anyways. It does nothing. So much about this movie is just doing little tweaking additional like scenery shots that do nothing for the film. Like, it really is to just irk me about all these additions that I don't think make a better movie. It just has it to just be like, we had nothing better to do, so we thought we could just go on and just add a bunch of these scenes in, to just make this a longer film, which it didn't need to be. But anyways, so that's also my opinion upon this film, and probably why I was kind of even teetering on saying that this is a solid good film, because it's being ruined by so many tweaking additional things that I really hated. And so while I was alive during the time of too many editions of Star Wars of these films to where they tweak and change it and modify it every year, all of a sudden, poof, we'd see the ghost of Anakin, and I'm like, why? I want to see the other guy who was actually Darth Vader in the movie. Why are we seeing a Hayden Christensen by the end of one of these early Star Wars films? I don't like that at all. No. I guess that adds to one of the later Star Wars films, but it adds nothing for me within that film. It honestly just really annoys me. So, with that said, people could also have probably to not really understood Star Wars all that well and probably get confused about a number of these additional scenes anyways. Like who's the Hayden Christensen character? Because I never went on and I never watched episodes 1, 2, and 3. Who is that? Oh, that's Anakin? Why is he appearing as a ghost? Oh, because the prequels exist. Yeah. So, anyway, since we're almost an hour in, let me know in the comments below how you digest Star Wars. Explain to me how you go on and you watch this. If you are to be more focused on the animated stuff, if you watch more of the live action films, if you have your own preference of Star Wars movies, let me know in the comments below anything that you want to just talk about of Star Wars. I am not an expert on this. I never want to become one because I have a freaking life. And I have so many other things that I have to keep tipping my fingers in and covering on this channel. And if all honesty, if at some point when I'm talking about any part of Star Wars in a little less of detail, it's because I didn't want to take the time to really go through in depth about research. But believe me, I am probably to have gone on and done a lot that I really just thumbed through and are now going to have to regurgitate back to you here so shortly. So, with that said, let's get into that. So, now it's about that time to go into spoiler time. It's about that time to get spoiled this movie. So let's get into it. So the beginning of this has us to do the whole crawl, where they go on and explain about Princess Leia and what's going on, explaining like a prelude to what is to go on with and actions to follow. Believe me, I had gone on to have watched this whole crawl of things the night before, and heaven forbid I go on and I can retain any of that now. Even though I read all of it, it goes in one ear and out the other because it's not a visual representation that I can latch onto. It's just a story yeah, it's completely to be lost by me because it's not visual. I hate to break it to Star Wars because I learn visually. Hence why I do this. So we now cut to the blockade runner that is getting intercepted by a Star Destroyer, and we'd come to find these blockade crewmen that are running around, and eventually to get stormtroopers invading their ship and they're blasting away. We have C-3PO and R2-D2 running around, and C-3PO is going on and feeling like this is their end, that this is madness. He's going on and like he just kind of like C-3PO has to go on and say like that everything is to kind of be like the worst outcome possible, and like he's to kind of be a very dark and brooding character throughout a good chunk of this film. And it's so interesting to see where he is to where eventually he is in later films. But anyways, so R2 starts to make his way through the ship and 3PO follows. Eventually, as R2 gets a little bit of distance away from C-3PO, 3PO asks where R2-D2 is, and curious of why R2-D2 is going in the direction that he is. So, as the stormtroopers have gone on to completely invade the barricade runner, we'd have Vader that comes into the ship and grabs a rebellion member named Ramus and is choking him to go on and ask where the plans are. And Ramus goes on to explain about how he's on a diplomatic mission and how they're just a simple consular ship. So as Vader goes on and asks where the ambassador is, which is basically just Leia, as it seems that Ramus won't give Vader much answers, he goes on and he kills Ramus, and then goes on to tell all the stormtroopers to find where the plans are and to find passengers and keep them alive so they can interrogate them and question them. So now we cut to Leia. Leia is to have gone on and given R2-D2 this message. And as C-3PO is to get close to R2-D2, eventually R2D2 comes away with Leia's message to have the two of them go off onto this escape pod to get out of there. So Leia is to have this blaster and is to be met by stormtroopers, and then she ends up getting captured. So as 3PO and R2 they escape through this pod, the Imperials go on and they scan the pod and they realize that there's no life forms in it, so they feel that it's a waste of time to try to go after the pod or to try to destroy it because there's no life forms in it. So they just write it off as like, it's not important. So Leia, now imprisoned and forced her way to meet up with Vader. Leia should try to go on and explain to Vader how she's just a simple Senate, and Vader is going on and saying that she is to be more than that. That she is to go on and be a traitor to the Rebel Alliance. And that also he's looking for plans that Leia consistently mentions that she has no idea what he's talking about. So as of course Vader is not going to get any answers from Leia. It's all about taking her away. Vader goes on and speaks with one of his commanders or uh, one of his men, and talks about how Vader has linked all of these rebel spies to Leia. So obviously she is to be a traitor. There's evidence there. There's an evidence trail. And so Vader is to get informed about an escape pod that had gotten ejected. And Vader is to immediately say that the hidden plans must have been from that escape pod, and they need to follow and track down that escape pod. And so now we cut to both 3PO and R2D2 in the sands of Tatooine. Man, uh, this is so weird doing this. Also, I don't think I'm doing this movie at all any justice, so if anything, check it out anyways. So, C3PO is talking to R2, and again for 3PO, it's always about what was me, and C3PO has gone on with R2 to travel so much of this desert that eventually 3PO is to say that his body will start to fall apart unless he rests. And as R2D2 is driven to continue on, and 3PO is continually asking R2 about what mission are you on, and R2 won't really explain. So at some point, as 3PO gets frustrated with R2, 3PO decides to go one way and R2 another, and 3PO explains that R2 will probably get captured and be begging for his life. and 3PO is not going the same direction R2 is, he's decided to go on this other path. So all of a sudden, 3PO off in the distance is to see what either looks like a ship or a person off in the distance. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is. And 3PO is to notice that it's someone to help him. He goes on to thrust his hands in the air, hoping that he's finally saved. To just find out that it's just Jawas, anyways, that would go on to EMP him or use this weird fire extinguisher like weapon that is to knock him out and drag him into the Sandcrawler to meet up with R2 later on. So now we cut to R2. R2 is making its way further through the desert of Tatooine, going into this much more rocky and mountain-like environment, to eventually come to find that as R2 makes his way through this environment, there are Jawas following him that are kind of peeking around to hope that the R2 unit doesn't see them, so that way they can go on and spring out of nowhere with their blast EMP-like weapon to knock R2 out, so that way they can drag him off to the Sandcrawler. As R2 makes his way through the Sandcrawler, its innards, this scene is almost horrific. Like it's to be very much like the animated movie like 9 or the one part in Toy Story where Woody and Buzz find the one guy's place with all those like very like misfitted, smashed together toys that look quite awful and quite a scene there. Yeah, it's kind of like what's going on here. So in the background we see a other droid called R5D4, and R5D4 I had actually had, and I maybe still do. I actually do have Star Wars action figures of a long time ago that were all like loose because I was a kid and I actually played with them and didn't think anything of it. I didn't know anything about value or anything. I just had a lot of them. I also kept some of the Attack of the Clone Wars action figures. I don't know. I like, if anything, uh, my dad just thought it was like a really cool idea to collect Star Wars action figures. I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's so much of these Star Wars action figures. I don't know if there's really going to be any real value in them. And really, they aren't. It's just really the very original Star Wars, like super early Star Wars stuff, or like a lot of people think that certain Force Awakens or Episode 1 action, like there's a lot of people that have their considerations on what could be popular, or what could be like the Black Series. Like, yeah, a lot of stuff here and there could be just really popular to collect. But anyway, so I had this R5D4, and he like thrusts out this weapon out of his body, because the body like splits in half, and then there's like a huge missile that comes out of his body. I'm like, okay. He never does that in the movie, but like it was just like, yeah, like this character was so very minimally used in this movie, they could have just done anything in it while using that action figure, because no one probably would have thought they would have bought this thing anyways. For how briefly he was, but for some odd reason, my parents had bought this for me, and then I didn't know what it really was until years later. Like, oh, it's that droid that was so used and so briefly used in Star Wars. So, but that's all I'm going to say. Who was all in the Sandcrawler? because I just can't go through all the details of this. So now we have stormtroopers on Tatooine. Uh, I think we'd have a skyhopper off in the distance, as well as also we see a stormtrooper with a dewback that he's riding, and so as the stormtroopers have found the pod, and now they have to kind of retrace the steps of where the droids had headed. We then cut back to R2D2 and C3PO that rejoin one another back at the Sandcrawler, and then they come to find out that everything has stopped, and they're kind of contemplating whether or not they're going to be melted down or destroyed here. The next thing we see is the Jawas pulling out all these droids so that way they can sell them off to Uncle Owen and Luke at Lars's homestead. So as Uncle Owen is going on and eventually making his way to the droids, all of a sudden, Aunt Beru. I was like, oh my god, is this going to be the first name I get tripped up by? Aunt Beru goes on and says to Luke that that if anything to be looking for a droid, look for one that's a translator and that can speak Bocce, I think. So Luke runs back to Uncle Owen, and Owen points at the R5D4, and then Owen looks at 3PO, and it's like, oh, are you just some protocol droid? I'm really looking for a translator right now. And 3PO is like, well, good, because I'm a translator. And Owen's like, well, do you speak Bocce? And 3PO's like, it's my second language. Like, yeah, like I easily speak it. 3PO is basically saying anything so that way he'll get these guys to buy him so he won't get killed or melted. So he'll lie to these people if it means that he can just get off this sandcrawler. So Owen says that 3PO will be really good for the things that he needs for evaporators and all these kind of farm equipment. So as Owen has Luke take both R5D4 and 3PO, as they walk off and Owen starts to pay, all of a sudden R5D4 completely is to have a bad motor and starts to smoke out of it. Owen is to look at the Jawa like, hey, are you trying to sell us some bad droids? Like, are you trying to like are you trying to sell us a lemon? So 3PO goes on to suggest to Luke about the other R2 unit, R2D2, because honestly 3PO doesn't really want to break up the set anyways. So it's like, well, hey, like that R2 unit, like I know is fully operational, and I know that you'll get a hell of a bargain. So Luke goes on and suggests it to Owen, and Owen is to go on and take both the droids. So Owen goes on to explain to Luke that he needs to go on and clean up the droids. At some point, Luke wanted to go to a Tossie station to pick up some power converters, and I think at some point we do actually see the station. But for the life of me, I can't remember exactly where that is in the film. But anyways, uh, so Luke takes 3PO to this oil bath, and as Luke plays a little with his skyhopper, he starts to realize that he needs to start cleaning up the R2 unit. And Luke starts to look at the R2 unit and realizes, like, wow, like, this R2 unit has built up a lot of gunk. It looks like you guys have been through a lot of battles. And 3PO is like, yeah, we've been through a lot. And as 3PO starts to explain to Luke about some of the things that they have been a part of, Luke is more fascinated by all of these stories. So because 3PO mentions about how he was a part of the rebellion that was facing off against the Empire. Okay, so as Luke is to find that there's something jammed in R2's body or part of him, all of a sudden here's where this message goes on to be like, help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. And it goes on and repeats itself over and over and over again. So Luke says how beautiful that Leia is, and is to go on to also talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and like, well, wait, maybe she's referring to old Ben. That's the only Kenobi I know. So C-3PO is to mention that R2 is to have had a new master called Kenobi, and so if anything, Luke is maybe thinking like, well, hey, maybe this had gotten stolen. Maybe Luke should try to go on and seek out Ben to see the connection to this whole thing, um, because he wants to do the honorable thing. So but Luke says that Ben is honestly in a dangerous place, and it's asking for trouble for Luke to go to the Dune Sea to try to retrieve Ben and speak to him. And after Luke goes on and removes this bolt, Luke's aunt starts to talk to him, and so C-3PO is to be upset with R2, like, well, hey, you better show him the whole recording of this. So we now cut to Luke, that makes his way to what looks like a dinner table and speaks to both Luke, or Owen, and Beru about how it's possible that this droid was stolen from a guy named Kenobi, but the only one that Luke knows is a Ben Kenobi. And Owen starts to say, it's like, well, yeah, like, I don't want anything to do with Kenobi, because Kenobi used to know your father before the war. And Luke is like, oh? Like, this man knew my father? And so Owen tries to write off Ben as some crazy wizard of an old man, and that the R2 unit should be headed into town just to have his mind erased, and that all they should be focusing on is on farmland and farming. And so Luke goes on and eventually asks of Owen about the whole, like, well, hey, can I go on to the academy now? Like, I know you had gone on to say that I had one season left and the season is almost up. And Owen says, no, I need you for the next season. And Luke is like, what? Like, I wanted to go on, I wanted to go to the academy. Owen goes on to explain, it's like, well, nope, like, I need you for one more season. Next season, we'll definitely go on and have enough money together to get more hands. And so Luke leaves because, like, well, yeah, like, that's what Owen had said before, and like there's so many times that, like, Luke has probably heard this at this point, that he realizes that it's never going to be that he's going to go anywhere. So Peru talks to Owen and says that Luke is destined to get beyond being on the farm, that if anything he's too much like his father. And Owen says, like, well, yeah, and that's not a good thing. So as the sons or son, I'm going to say sons, as they sit on Tatooine, here's where Luke goes on and does the long staring out in the sky, hoping that someday he'll go on and be in an X-Wing facing off against the Empire and or Imperials or whoever and wiping them all out. So as Luke makes his way back, here's where C-3PO breaks the news to Luke that the R2 unit is now gone, that is now disappeared. Luke rushes out to eventually try to track where the R2 unit is. He goes on and he pops off what I think is the macro binoculars and starts to look around. Owen goes on to call out to Luke that he's shutting the power down for the night. And Luke says to C-3PO that R2 is going to give him a lot of trouble in the future. So Owen and Peru are both talking, and Owen starts asking about Luke. And Peru mentions about how Luke had probably left very early, but probably he's been out all night, trying to find where the R2 unit is. And so Luke and C-3PO are in this land speeder, and they fly past some Tusken Raiders who are eventually to spot this land speeder and go on to make their way on, I think, a bantha and ride off to try to intercept Luke and the droids. So finally, as Luke goes on to spot the R2 and they all group back together, C-3PO tells R2 that he should have stayed with Luke, that Luke is now their owner, that Kenobi has no ties with them now. And if anything, R2 could have easily died in a environment like this. And so Luke is also in fear because there's a good possibility that there's too many factors here of too many things that can go on and definitively kill them in this area. So they need to think fast about getting to land speeder and getting the heck out of here. So as Luke again is to hear some rumblings and is to assume that it could possibly be sand people or something worse. Luke again gets out the micro or macro binoculars and goes on to spot some Tusken Raiders and their banthas. But then eventually there's a Tusken Raider right in front of Luke's face, clubbing him and taking him down. A Raider is to be hovering over Luke as they have dragged him to this one spot, and the droids are watching Luke off in the distance, and that's who's like we're getting the the POV from. And so all of a sudden there's this mysterious man in this cloak who makes this a strange noise that scares away the raiders, and the man in the cloak comes ever so close to Luke to try to get him back to his feet, and that's none other than Ben. Ben, I like some of the dialogue here. It's like, "Hey, you had a busy day. Luckily, you're alive, one piece." So, uh, so Ben asks Luke, "It's like, why did you go out here so far?" And Luke starts mentioning about the R2 droid and how it was so adamant about trying to find this former master of his named Kenobi, and then goes on to ask if Ben has any knowledge of that name of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ben goes on to say, I haven't heard that name in a very long time, and that name is actually me. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I go mostly by Ben now. And Ben says, like, well, yeah, like, I don't remember ever having a droid, so, like, I don't know why this droid is to come for me here and now. Like, it makes no sense. So, Ben explains to Luke and the droids that they better get inside so that way it's safer. And Ben and Luke find C-3PO kind of ripped through parts where his arms and legs are kind of all over the place. So as Ben, Luke, and the droids all get inside, here's where Luke asks Ben about knowledge of his father, because Luke is to have gone on and heard some random bits of stories about his father being a spice raider, and Ben is to go on and correct him. And say that Luke's father was a Jedi Knight just like him, and that he had eventually gone on to fight alongside his father, going on and describing him in depth about how cunning and whatever he was. Eventually, to go on and explain, Ben did that Luke's father was killed in action, which eventually we'll come to find out that that isn't true. We won't. We'll find out a bigger story down the road of who Luke's father really is. The mystery of it all. I'm sure freaking everybody knows. Like, people who have probably never even seen Star Wars know what the big reveal is of this whole thing. It's kind of like the big reveal of Fight Club. I'm sure a lot of people have never even seen Fight Club, but they probably know the big reveal of that movie too. Or Sixth Sense, any of these other bigger films. Anyways, so let me know in the comments below the biggest movie that you know the spoilers of. Or you got ruined to the spoiler of something. Maybe even Star Wars, because I'm doing that for you now. You're ruining it! Anyways, so Ben makes his way to this little chest that has a lightsaber to give to Luke. And it's quite interesting because honestly, for me, I am to be one that actually loves the green lightsaber, but I'd come to find out that a green lightsaber is kind of much more of like a peacekeeper lightsaber, and so very few of people actually use green lightsabers because most of the time green lightsabers means that it's a Jedi that most of the time is to negotiate and talk things out instead of going on and actually fighting. To where the Jedis that do actually have the blue lightsabers, they're the ones that get into the more aggressive negotiations, like Anakin is so much of saying in another movie at some point in prequels before. And then of course there's like the weird purples and yellows and of course the reds that are the Siths. But yeah, to have at some point just have like the novelty of like, hey, what interesting unique color could all these lightsabers be? To the point to where we have a Mandalorian where now they have to have like these weird goofy sword like things that I can't remember the name of. That feels like a lightsaber, but it's not really quite that. Let me know in the comments below what that is, because go on and correct me about everything. At least it's a comment. I definitely know I'm kind of talking a little bit outside my depth. But if anything, I get to have fun talking about Star Wars. Yeah, fun talking about this. So Ben hands Luke the lightsaber, and so he turns it on and gives it a couple of waves. And so Ben is to talk about how Jedis were guardians and were peacekeepers and were to bring justice to the old rebellion before all the dark times and the orders of the 66s and killing younglings. Where's that from? But so he killed younglings. So I don't remember these Star Wars movies at all. So so here's where Ben goes on and talks about the death of Luke's father. And so Luke now has to go on and ask Ben about the Force and what it is, and how he explains about how it's like an energy field that surrounds them, penetrates them, is just kind of like, it's kind of like a thing that they can feel, and like it's also like a thing that they can like use to have like psychic powers and be able to kind of move things with their minds and be able to kind of block attacks from happening. And eventually, when we start to see characters that can use their force powers very significantly, man, is it quite a sight. But until then, we'll of course go on and just kind of see how Luke uses it within this film, if he ever does. Which is really just him using the force to just hit uh, the one exhaust port. Anyways, so now we finally cut to Ben finally getting to see the message that was from the R2 unit. Because Luke goes on and says, like, well, yeah, I only got to see part of it. And so Ben plays the message and he gets the whole thing. Leia goes on to basically say in a very quick way that she is to be smuggling some information in this R2 unit that she hopes that Ben will go on and will give to the rebellion, and and uh and that he needs to deliver it to Alderaan. So that's the reason why they're going to Alderaan. So of course we immediately have Ben turn to Luke. It's like, well, obviously we got to go to Alderaan now, and Luke turns to Ben. It's like, dude, I can't go to Alderaan. I'm a farmer. Like, I gotta go and I gotta do my chores. I gotta, like, I have a life. Like, I can't just go gallivanting off with you. Like the best I can take you um, is just to Anchorhead. And so Ben is to try and plead with Luke to try and say that's like, well, I'm not, I'm getting too old for this kind of stuff. Like, uh, and so, and then also like the more that Luke argues, Ben is just like, well, like, is that you really saying this, or is this your uncle and like stuck in your uncle's ways? And like, Luke, wouldn't you want to go on and wouldn't you want to go on an adventure? Like, I know you do. Like, I can read your thoughts, Luke. You want to go on an adventure. You desperately do. So, so the more that Ben speaks with Luke, Ben goes on and takes what's good enough that Luke will go on and agree to. So now we make our way to this Star Destroyer making its way to the Death Star. So here's, of course, where Vader makes his way into this conference room where there's a bunch of commanders that are all yelling at one another. I think one of them is like Cassio that is going on and arguing with a guy named Admiral Mati, and but there's also just a number of just commanders that are all yelling and screaming, and and so uh so one of the commanders is or so Cassio is going on and talking about how they have to fix that exhaust port because that is kind of a weakness of the Death Star that at some point the Rebel Alliance will probably exploit, and And Vader is like, well, but our main focus is to be getting back these plans, and that's to be our big focus. So here is where we go on to start having Mahdi. Mahdi starts chiming in against Lord Vader, goes on to explain how the Death Star is to be the ultimate power, and that if anything, it's more powerful or similar to the close to the power of the Force, which of course only Vader really is to supposedly have at this point, because there is to be no evidence of any Jedi's that really do exist at this time in Star Wars. So Monty starts to talk about Vader's religion and starts to talk about his sorcery. And the more and more he starts bad mouthing Vader's Force religion and how Monty doesn't really believe much in Vader, Vader Force chokes him and finds that his lack of faith is disturbing. So Vader lets Monty go, and so he just kind of drops onto the table and kind of gags a little bit. So Tusken's statement is that they will hope that they will crush the rebellion soon. As we then cut back to now Luke, who's with Ben at the Sandcrawler, to come to find that Tusken Raiders had gone on to have assumed first gone on and take out this Sandcrawler, but then we realized that it's actually to have been possibly stormtroopers that have blasted its way through this Sandcrawler because they wanted to track down these droids. And Luke is to come to the conclusion, it's like, well, wait a minute. If the stormtroopers were chasing after the Sandcrawler, which had these droids, which was to have the stormtroopers kind of trace back the tracks of the uh the Sandcrawler, that would probably take them to my home. And so Luke gets in his land speeder to make his way back to the Lars homestead, to come to find that the homestead is all smoked out. Luke will make his way to the doorway of his home to find that there are extra crispy corpses that he's looking at. And honestly, Luke maybe should have gone on, and Luke should have had all kinds of different kind of wide range of emotions. And Ben kind of tells Luke, it's like, well, hey, like, believe me, like, you could not have gone on and been here. If you were here, you would not have been able to do anything to keep yourself alive. So if anything, it was good that you came with me, because now you're alive now. Because otherwise he would have been dead. And Luke goes on to explain to Ben, it's like, well, yeah, there's nothing left for me here, so I guess I'm just left to go with you to make our way to Alderaan, because what else do I have going on for me? So now we cut to the Death Star as some TIE fighters are making their way into the Death Star. Vader is making his way with some naval troopers to Princess Leia's holding cell. It's not a detention cell. It's some other kind of holding cell. It's some other place. So Vader is going to go on and give Leia a little bit of a interrogation drone and give her a hallucination to try and hope that he can use his force powers to figure out what it is that she knows. So we then have the naval troopers that walk off as Leia's getting interrogated. And now we cut back to Ben and Luke and the droids now in the land speeder making their way through what I believe is Mos Eisley. Still, we're in Tatooine here, but this is Mos Eisley. It's a spaceport. So, Ben tells Luke that they need to be cautious here, and Luke will get into a fight when they get to the cantina, because it'll just kind of be a whole little bit of mistake here. As they fly by with the land speeder, we'll see a number of just random robots or CGI crap that they just added here in the scene that doesn't really add anything to the movie, but it's just there, I guess. So I guess probably storyboarding this out. Maybe this is what Lucas had in mind when he was doing this film, but he just didn't have the budget for it or the abilities to try these things, but they can now. So almost 2 hours in. Yikes. So the stormtroopers go on and stop both Ben and Luke, and here is where Luke goes on and does the whole Jedi mind trick. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Luke can go about his business, and so eventually Luke ends up turning to Ben. It's like, what did you just do there? And Ben explains how he can use the Force and the weak-minded to persuade them. Because if anything, in Knights of the Old Republic, you're going to be doing a lot of persuading. If anything, the persuading will be a lot effing harder than it will be in Elder Scrolls Skyrim. You can persuade freaking anybody in that game. But, man, in Knights of the Old Republic, man, is persuading anybody freaking hard in that game. It becomes a miserable adventure when you have to get into talking points with people because you realize, like, dude, I haven't really built up any of my persuading points. Like I'm not really good with persuasion. Like, man, this sucks. Like I can't go on and get any better with this game just because I can't really talk to people and use my force powers on them. It just sucks. So oops. Okay, so for anybody who's going on and watching any of these videos, I do appreciate anybody checking them out. Because, yeah, I know that these ones are kind of really super long, and this is freaking Star Wars. This is... I had already gone to explain this whole thing, and it took forever. It took like an hour to explain it all. Now I'm trying to explain it again in more detail. So, let's get into this. So, we get into the cantina, and I'm not going to go and I'm not going to mention every single freaking character that's in this cantina, because there's a lot of them. The only ones that I will explain is the band. Yeah. Like we'd go on and everybody starts to complain about how they play the exact same song over and over and over again. It's at some point where I think in Mario Maker, Aaron and Danny, they go on and do the Yoda joke things. But then I think they also start to talk about Star Wars and they start to make fun of it. Like they start to mention about the whole cantina thing, how like the song just kind of plays over and over and over again, and and it's kind of like the Mario bit of levels where like it's the same song over and over and over again because they keep having to replay the levels. Anyways, so as the band is playing, here's where we have Ben that goes on and meets up briefly with Boshek, and then as Boshek is disinterested, Ben then meets up with Chewie or Chewbacca. So Luke comes into the cantina with the droids, and Wooer, who is to be the bartender, goes on to explain that they won't service droids there, and so he has to leave them outside. That he doesn't kind of want their kind here. So Luke explains that the droids need to go outside, and so we start to see some characters in the background. We start to see like Guidos and all these other characters. At some point, Booty Baba Yaga had gone on to do this whole closet cosplay because she does a lot of these like Star Wars things where she goes into these closet cosplays and she did a thing about Guido. I'm like, oh man, I know Guido. Like freaking, I had an action figure of Guido. Like, eventually, I was to be like, oh yeah, like I think it's the whole like who shot first thing with Guido. It's so interesting how like Guido gets killed so quickly in this movie, but then we still see so many background shots of Guido endlessly in this film. I don't know if it's the same costume Guido, but we keep seeing Guido everywhere in the background of this film. So I'm just like, did they kill him off? Like, what was going on there? Like, did they just assume that all the Guidos dress alike, or like what did they do there? I'm just so interested to just try to figure out if like maybe they didn't think that anybody would be paying any attention to background stuff. But anyways, so as Ben is talking to Chewie, Luke is at the counter going on and finding out that he has a person that doesn't like him. So Luke all of a sudden bumps into a guy named Ponda Baba, and he doesn't take a liking to Luke. All of a sudden, Cornelius comes from behind and starts speaking to Luke and says, "Hey, he doesn't like you." And Luke is like, "Well, I'm sorry." And then Cornelius is like, "Well, yeah, I don't like you." And so as Ben hopes that he can probably use his force powers on this guy, or just to negotiate with him to kind of not have things go south here. Cornelius goes on to thrust Luke away, and then Ben is now forced to get out his lightsaber to chop off Baba's hand and take out Cornelius and Baba and whatever. So next, Ben goes on with Luke to meet up with Han Solo. And so Ben tells Luke that they found a pilot that will be suitable for their needs. So as 3PO and R2 are looking around outside, they're noticing that stormtroopers are starting to ask questions. So, and they're not going to be the only ones. So Hans goes on and starts talking to Ben and Luke and starts to negotiate about going to the Alderaan system, and eventually once Han is to explain to them how fast the Falcon goes, like, yeah, like we did the Calcer run in 12 parsecs. Ooh, what an accomplishment. Wow. So, uh, so Han asks about the cargo. Ben says it's only passengers. And Han asks about any local trouble, and Ben says that there's been some Imperial ones. So he's like, well, okay, all right, well, all right, $10,000. Luke is like, oh my god, $10,000? We can get our own vehicle for that. We can get our own ship out for that. Ben goes on and agrees, but he's like, okay, 2,000 now and 15 later, so it's 17,000. Plus, also, Ben is hoping that Princess Leia is going to go on and pay for everything later on, so that's what he's banking on, because Luke will go on and say to Han that, hey, Leia's rich. We should go and we should save her, Han, because she's rich. You'll get a reward. And Han was like, reward, you say? Ah, all right. Yeah, let's save her. So Han says to Ben, you've gotten yourself a ship. Meet me at Docking Bay 94. And so as stormtroopers start to make their way around and Ben and Luke disappear, Han and Chewie start to talk about how these guys are so desperate, and then he'll finally be able to make his money to give to Jabba. And so Ben uh, goes on to explain to Luke that he's going to go on and he's going to need to sell his speeder. Luke says, I'm never coming to this planet again, so sure, I'll sell my speeder. And so now we cut to Han, who's eventually going to be dealing with. Yeah, he's going to be dealing with Guido. So Han gets stopped by Guido, and Han is to say to Guido, it's like, well, hey, I got Jabba's money. Uh, if anything, Han starts talking to Guido about like, hey, like anybody could get bored or da, da, da. Like, eventually he'll go on and say a lot of the stuff Han that says to Guido, who saw the exact same thing to the Hutt. So, if anything, Han is just very relaxed right now because he knows that he'll have the money and hoping that Guido will understand that, which he won't. And that will lead to what looks like Guido shooting first and then Han shooting second. Han goes on and shifts his head and then fires second. But there is always a debate back and forth of who shot first. If anything, Han always goes on and says that he shot first, because of course he did. He's the one that's alive. But also, kind of, if you really slow it down, or from what I saw, like it looked like Guido shot first and then Han shot second. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Because Han is still the one that's alive. Uh, and isn't that what really matters? But also, uh, what started to escalate things here is Guido is talking about how he wants to take Han's ship, and Han will not allow that. And that's when blasters start coming out and people end up dead. Han pays Wooer for the whole mess and then leaves. So, uh, since the Empire can't get any information out of Leia at this point, they're going to escalate things. And Tarkin is to realize that the Death Star is almost at full power. So if anything, they're going to have a test run on their uh, biggest attack, and they're going to use it against Alderaan. So, hoping that Leia will go on and give them the rebel base, and they'll still blow up Alderaan anyways. So, now we cut back to the droids, and um, both of the droids are going on locking doors, and the stormtroopers are trying to follow where the droids are. And Luke and Ben are trying to make their way to the docking bay. Well, it seems like there is some snitch in this cloak attire that is following them. So, Han makes his way back to the Falcon and is met by Jabba. Han goes on to explain to Jabba that he wasn't running and that he will go on and and uh and pay Jabba. Um, man, I'm kind of lost in my tracks here. Um, so Han goes on and Han explains to Jabba how he will go on, he will pay Jabba the payment that he owes him, and this time he'll give interest. He'll pay extra. And Jabba asks for 20%, and eventually they bargain it down. So, oddly enough, Han Solo goes on and says that Jabba the Hutt is a human being, and he's not that at all. He's an alien. So for whatever reason, I guess Han maybe calling Jabba a human being doesn't make sense. But I guess maybe that line was thrown in there as a mistake. I don't know. Either way, it doesn't make sense. So, as Ben and Luke are followed by the droids making their way to the Falcon, Ben and Luke look at it and realize it's a hunk of junk, and Han talks about how he's made a lot of special modifications on this, and as soon as they can get on board, the quicker they can get out of here, as well as also the stormtroopers are shortly there behind trying to get to the droids, and eventually Han will realize that stormtroopers are blasting at the Millennium Falcon as Han realizes that they have to scramble out of there. So, Han is to try to turn on the deflector shields, and Han is talking to Chewie about getting to light speed and how they have to calculate it soon. Ben and Luke are going on and asking about hyperspace, and Han says, well, yeah, like I just need time to do calculations. You can't not do calculations, or you'll accidentally hit something, and then, if anything, your mission will end a lot sooner than you expected it to be. So now here is where Tarkin brings in Leia to threaten her with the destruction of Alderaan. And so Tarkin keeps asking for the rebel base, and Leia explains that it's on Dantooine, and Tarkin is just like, well, okay, we're just gonna blow up Alderaan anyways. and Tarkin says that it's far too remote, uh, and won't be an effective enough demonstration that, if anything, Alderaan will be uh, so close, and why not go on and take this out now? And I'm not quite sure exactly what this actual big, massive attack really is. And if anything, let me pause here for a second. All right, so Google just calls this big attack like a super laser. It's a planet-destroying super laser is what I got from Google. If anything, if there is actually a technical term for this actual attack that was to be claimed somewhere in a Star Wars thing at some point, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure it exists out there. So, shortly thereafter, the Death Star goes on and destroys Alderaan. We have Han and the Falcon making its way to Alderaan. So they're going to find out that something doesn't exist quite soon. It's like Kenobi that goes to that one library and realizes that there seems to be in the archives a planet that doesn't exist. It should be right here, but it doesn't exist. And that somebody had wiped it from the archive memory. So Kenobi just has to go on and hope the best of luck that he can find this one planet that exists somewhere that's not in their archive memory. And it ends up being the place where Obi-Wan finds the Clone Wars, the Clone Army. Um, anyways, pushing on. So here's where Ben takes Luke and gives him this training remote and gives him the lightsaber and has him practice using the Force. And while that's going on, we have R2-D2 and Chewie that are playing table chess. Honestly, I don't know exactly what the table chess is to actually be called. I was to just go on and find some random thing where somebody just said table chess, so I'm taking it from there. So, Ben at some point is to kind of fall off to the side a little bit, and Luke runs off to be like, oh, Ben, what's the matter? Ben goes on to this long thing of like, man, I just felt something really powerful. Like a large number of people had all gotten, had all cried out in terror all at once. And something terrible must have happened. So Ben doesn't know exactly what that is, and Luke goes right back into his training as Ben is like, oh, just concentrate on that. So as Luke starts to use his lightsaber to face off against the training remote, we have Han that goes on to say, it's like, well, yeah, like we got away unscathed. Aren't you all gonna thank me? And no one does. So Han looks at R2D2, who is beating the Wookiee at table chess, and tells him, hey, like, do bad at table chess. If anything, like, Chewie will go on and rip your arms off if you're beating him at this. So C-3PO goes and tells R2 to have a new strategy by just letting Chewbacca win this. And so he does. So at some point, Han starts to see Luke struggling also with the training remote. And Han says that, like, oh yeah, a lightsaber is good and all, but it's not as good as a blaster. And Ben goes on and gives Luke this helmet, and it has a blast shield on it, which Luke can't see. So, Han at some point also here will say his beliefs about the Force and how, like, he can't believe that something outside of his own self is kind of controlling his destiny. That Han feels that he wants to be responsible for his own destiny. And like that makes a lot of sense. Like there's some people that are like atheists out there, and there's some people that don't believe in anything, that they all could say that it's coincidence or luck or whatever. Everybody has their belief system, and that's completely okay. And it's kind of interesting how like Han is to kind of share that he doesn't believe in the Force here, because it's quite interesting to see how this character is to change over time. So also Han doesn't believe in such things like lucks or coincidences and stuff like that. So, uh, so at some point when Luke does go on and better the remote, that is when Han is just like, oh well, he just got lucky. uh, so, or no, wait. Yeah, maybe Han does. Yeah, maybe there wasn't. Maybe there's something about coincidence and luck or something in there. Is what I was going with, but maybe Han didn't say anything exactly like that. My bad. I got that wrong. I know he said something about luck, which was right there. Anyways, so Luke could feel something, and so Luke is starting to understand the Force, and Ben is just telling Luke he's getting started. So now back in the conference room, they're going on. They're obviously saying the next plans is to make their way to Dantooine and find the remains of the rebel base. And uh, um, and so uh, and also that they should go on and they should kill Princess Leia, because regardless of the information that she had given them, she's still a traitor to them. And now that it's kind of pointless to have her here, you might as well kill her off anyways. Because what good is she to you now? So, Han is to eventually explain to everybody that they're getting out of hyperspace, and now they are supposedly supposed to be arriving at Alderaan. And all of a sudden, it seems that there's a bunch of debris and there's a bunch of comets or meteors or something. And Han thinks that this is very strange. And so, uh, oh, it's a meteor shower, is what he says. So, Han says they're at the right place, but this is no Alderaan location. And they're trying to figure out how a planet just gets destroyed, and it must have something to do with the Empire. So they're trying to figure out where exactly a base could even be, because it doesn't really seem that they can spot one nearby or anything that makes any real sense. But all of a sudden, they see a TIE fighter, and Han realizes that they need to shoot it down because otherwise, the TIE fighter will lead them to be meeting more Imperials or Empire, and they don't want that. So Han starts to follow the ship, and Luke turns to Chewie and says that he has a bad feeling about this. So I'm trying to. So as Han follows the TIE fighter, he accidentally realizes that he's getting pulled in by the Death Star. No matter what Han tries to do, nothing is working. They're getting pulled in. So now we have the stormtroopers and naval troopers going on to make their way to the Millennium Falcon, and they mentioned about how there's only a freighter left uh, from Alderaan, and this was the same ship from before that had the droids and Ben and Luke and these people that might be going on and maybe working for the rebellion. So Vader says that they must be trying to go on and retrieve the plans that they had gotten from the droids. They must be trying to figure out a way to bring the plans either back to a rebel and alliance or to bring the plans back to Leia. And if anything, Leia will be a good bargaining chip for them yet, or bait uh, for the people housed in the Falcon. So one of the commanders goes on to make his way into the Falcon and then comes back out of it, explaining to Vader that it seems that there is no one inside of it. That it seems that by the time they figured out that they were getting pulled in, that they had sent out, assuming a bunch of pods, or that somehow they'd all escaped because there's no one inside of the ship. All of a sudden, after all the stormtroopers have left the ship, there is all of a sudden these uh, compartments that start opening up, and we find that Luke, Han, Chewie are all hiding, and the droids are all hiding underneath these little secret compartments underneath this little uh, this little hallway into the Falcon. So they have to figure out how to detract the tractor beam, and so now they have to make their way into the Death Star to figure out how they're going to turn off all the main reactors, that are 7 of them, to then get them to be able to leave this ship. And Han says that this is going to be a foolish endeavor, but they're going to do it anyways. So, as some Imperials make their way into the Falcon, which were to have been beaten up by Han and Luke, and then Han calls for stormtroopers to make their way into the ship, and one of the officers in a computer room nearby is to call upon the stormtrooper and ask why he's off of his post. The stormtrooper goes on and bumps his helmet, saying that they've lost all comms. So, as the stormtroopers make their way back to this computer station, this computer room, they fire upon all of the Empire, and as they lock the door behind him, Luke, I think, makes a joke about how, with Han's blasting and Chewie's making noises and all the sounds that they're making, like he's sure that that the Empire will know exactly where they are. So here's where C-3PO hooks into, or here's where R2 hooks into the computer system and realizes that there will be 7 main reactors for them to take out in order for them to drop the tractor beam. And there's a location of them all in this blueprint. So Ben goes on to explain to Luke that he must go alone to do this tractor beam mission, and Luke wants to go with Ben, but Ben says, "No, I'm going to do this alone. You just watch the droids." So Ben goes on and talks about a different, that Luke needs to go onto a different path, as well as also Ben tells Luke, "Let the Force be with him." So Han goes on and makes fun of Ben, calling him an old fossil, and Luke says that Han isn't exactly going on and shelling out plans for what they should do next. So the next bit of business that we do get here is that R2 is to find Princess Leia, and goes on to explain to Luke how she's been found, that she's in a detention cell, and it's Princess Leia, the one who had sent the message to Ben before. Luke's face is kind of very priceless here with this big wide bit of shock. And so now Luke is pushing Han as much as he can. It's like, well, hey, yeah, we gotta go find her. We gotta go find the princess. And Han is like, what are you talking about? I'm not going and finding no princess. I'm just gonna sit right here and wait it out till Ben comes back. And Luke is like, no, like, weren't you the one that wanted to go on and wanted to do something? We're gonna go and we're gonna do something. We're gonna find the princess. So Han is lounging around, and so Luke goes on and says, like, well, hey, think about it. She's a princess. She has a lot of money. And then Han is like, money, you say? Yeah, that's to be the one convincing thing that gets Han to then act. So, uh, so Han tells Luke, you better be right about this. And so now as Luke and C-3PO are going to have these communicators, so that way they can talk to one of these little lipstick-sized um, little communicators between one another. Uh, Luke is to also ask C-3PO uh, for these things called binders. That's what I was trying to think of before. So Luke goes on and hands Chewie the binders, and Chewie screams at Luke, and so Luke turns to Han. It's like, you put these on him. And Han is like, yeah, I can completely understand what he's doing, so I get what the plan is. So the two stormtroopers and Chewie make their way through elevators, and this is all while Ben is kind of walking all around the Death Star without being spotted, weirdly enough. I guess maybe Ben has his force power, so I guess he can easily just be able to kind of make people forget that he's even there, or push people to go into certain directions because of the force. And then we start to see that Darth Maul is starting to make, or Darth Vader is to start to make his way through the ship. I think at some point Vader is to go on and feel that Ben is to be within inside the Death Star. And so the stormtroopers and Chewie make their way to the detention cell, and here's where Chewie gets loose. Blast starts firing off, and they fire all onto the cameras, destroying them all. So Han is getting quick to the comms, and so Han is trying to tell Luke exactly where Leia is so he can go and retrieve her. She's in cell 2187. And then Han gets on to the communicator to talk to some of the officers to explain how he had some weapons malfunctions and everything's all right here. How are you? So, they obviously don't believe what Han is telling them, so they're saying that they're going to bring a squad by, and Han is like, "No, we have a reactor leak here. You can't come in here. It's very dangerous. Large leak." And so, eventually, there's nothing he can do more to convince uh, the soldiers that they're not going to come in there and investigate. So Han just goes on and blasts the console and explains to Luke that there's company coming. Luke goes into the cell to explain to Leia that he's come here to rescue her, uh, that he has her R2 unit, and he had gone on to meet with Ben Kenobi. And then Leia's like, "Oh, Ben Kenobi? All right, let's go, let's scramble. All right." So here's where Darth Vader goes on and speaks with Tarkus about Obi-Wan and how he feels that he's in or around the ship. He can feel it. And it's been a very long time since last feeling the presence of his old master, who is Kenobi. And Tarkin is to assume that Kenobi is to be dead, and Vader is to say, it's like, well, hey, don't underestimate the Force. So Tarkin's is to immediately say that Jedis have been extinct, and that if anything, he does not believe Vader's claims. But anyways, we cut to uh also, and Tarkin says like, well, if you are correct, then kill him before he escapes. And Vader will say that he will face him alone. All right. So Han is now to realize that a squad of stormtroopers are now blasted their way through into this detention cell, forcing Han and Chewie to make their way further back into this hallway to meet up with both Han and Leia. Leia starts cracking wise about, I thought this was a rescue mission, and and Han is like, well, maybe you should go back to your cell, princess, like, or your highness. Yeah, he goes on and calls her all these kind of goofy nicknames, which I absolutely love. So, the more Han and Luke can't figure out some kind of plan of what to do, at some point Luke even calls 3PO to ask if there's an alternate route for them to escape, and even 3PO can't come up with an answer, because if anything, he has troopers coming at his door trying to come in and figure out what's going on within the station or within this computer room. So, leaving 3PO and R2 to be locking themselves into this room to explain to the stormtroopers that they had been locked in this room and these people just kind of ran off. So, here's where finally Leia ends up getting a gun being thrown to Luke, and so she blasts into this sewer drain and then jumps into it. Han is to be questioning whether he wants to kill Leia or like her, and so Luke jumps into the trash compactor after Chewie does, and Chewie kind of complains, so Han kind of just kicks him in. Then when Han goes in there, he starts to like, well, hey, I'll just go and I'll just blast my way to open this door. And Luke is like, well, hey, I already tried that. It's magnetically sealed. So what are we going to do now? So the more they try to figure out how to get out of this area, all of a sudden there's something that is going to try to be getting at them. A monster called the Diagnoga. The Diagnoga goes on and puts its head out like a weird kind of submarine periscoping like thing, and all of a sudden Lucas just spots something, but then it disappeared, so he couldn't tell what it is. Something is swimming so quickly around them that like they're trying to figure out what it is that is in there with them. And finally, at some certain point, Luke is to be grabbed, shucked into the water, and Han is trying to figure out where exactly Luke is. It's just like, Luke, and he just kind of puts his hand in the water. And then Luke just kind of like thrusts back out of the water. It's like, oh my God. And he's getting wrangled by the Diagnoga, and he's getting strangled by it. And he's just telling Han, he's like, shoot at it. Shoot. And Han's like, where? He's like, shoot anywhere. And so Han just starts blasting everywhere. And finally, at some point, the Diagnoga releases Luke and escapes, and they don't know why. But what's going on is all of a sudden the trash compactor is starting to condense in. It's starting to eventually get smaller and smaller. So Han goes on and takes this really long long stick of a piece and tries to stop the compactor from pressing even more. And as they're just trying to figure out how to get higher, and Han keeps telling Leia to get higher, she's like, I'm trying. And Luke is like, what are we gonna do? And so Luke is to realize, oh, why don't I just call 3PO? So as Luke tries to call 3PO, there's no answer. And so 3PO and R2D2, they go to this whole separate area that is nearby the hangar bay, or is nearby the Millennium Falcon. And so R2 just inserts himself back into the system, and then 3PO is asking, I wonder what happened to our friends. And R2 is like, well, hey, how about you turn the communicator back on so you can see where they are? Maybe they're going to say anything to you. So 3PO is like, oh, I completely forgot about it. And so as he turns it on, oh, it's a comm link. My bad. Communicator, comm link. I had to get something incorrect here. So as finally Luke can now talk to 3PO, because he's like, C3PO, where could he be? He keeps saying that over and over. Where could he be? So Luke goes on and scrambles to explain the numbers that is of this very specific trash compactor area, and to lock it down, to lock the whole floor down. And 3PO goes on to tell R2 to do just that, and all of a sudden the trash compactor stops moving, and they all start screaming, and C3PO is like, oh my god, they're dead, I killed them. Like, if only I would have been faster, I would have saved them. And it's so funny, like 3PO is like, oh my god, I killed them all. And then they're like, no, 3PO, you saved us. Like, all right. Like, so, and he's like, oh, thank God. So they explain to 3PO what door they need to have him open, because they can't open it themselves. So now as they start to make their way through hallways, here's where they're going to have to kind of like fight their way out. And man, we are cutting it freaking close here. We're an hour, 2 hours and a half. Holy this may be the first 3 hour one, and I hate to break it to everybody, but it's probably gonna happen because this one there's too much detail. I'm gonna try to squeak it underneath 2 hours. So here's where I'm gonna be rushing. Uh, so I think this is the perfect time to start rushing, anyways. So, but I really do love this scene though. God dang it. Uh, So Leia doesn't know any of these people, and I love also how Leia insults Chewie by saying that he's a walking carpet. I love that whole thing. Um, the more that Leia is just getting so, like, she's attacking all the people that have just gone on to save her, and Han is like, "There's no reward worth this." So Leia's getting in front of everybody, and Leia is saying to them that they are going to follow her out. And so uh and Han is to be the person that doesn't want to take any orders from anybody but himself, or something along those lines. It's like that there's only one boss here, and it's to be Han. Um, so here's where Ben continues to comb through reactors as Luke and Han, or as As Luke and Leia separate from Chewie and Han, as there's a number of stormtroopers that start to gather. So here's where Luke and Leia, they get stuck by this bridge that's out as they need to get to this other door that they couldn't figure out how to make the bridge attach to one door to the other. And Luke also blasted the door so that way the bridge wouldn't work anyways. So the stormtroopers start to come for Luke and Leia. The door closes, and so now they have to figure out what to do next. Luke goes on and realizes that in his belt from the stormtrooper that he has this grappling hook, so he uses it, and the two of them go swinging. Leia kisses him for luck. So as a number of stormtroopers start to gather around the Falcon, and 3PO and R2 are looking on, here's where we see both Ben and Darth Vader meet, and the troopers are all starting to gather around both Ben and Vader to see them both fight. So Vader calls Ben a weak old man, and how if he is to go on Vader and strike Ben down, he's become more powerful than he can imagine. And that they should have never met again. Okay, so now Ben, Leia, Han, and Chewie are just waiting for the troopers to move, and once they do, we have Ben and his group all making to the Falcon, and the droids are to follow. The more that Ben is fighting with Vader, eventually he does spot that Luke, because he feels him because of the Force, I guess. And so Ben notices that Ben has made his way back with the Falcon, with Leia and everybody. So Ben just goes on and takes his lightsaber and just puts it up and just lets Vader hit him. Ben completely has his cloak fall to the ground, but Ben is not at all there. Even Vader does go on and kind of push his foot around to realize that Ben has all of a sudden disappeared. So Luke screaming out because Ben had just died, and how much like Luke is to realize that Ben was like the closest thing to family to him. Weirdly, Leia goes on and thrusts this towel or this blanket over Luke after he is to have lost Ben, which I'm like, man, his whole entire family died in front of him, and where was Ben with a cloak to give him then? Like, I don't know why. Also, that after like a very horrible traumatic experience, they always have to go on and thrust a blanket or something over somebody. You'd be like, hey, I don't want to get freaking sweaty. Like, I don't know what the whole blanket thing symbolizes. Like, is it just their way of like, hey, we're gonna go on and showcase that this is some kind of like comforting this person, but like not exactly embracing them or making them feel better verbally. We're just gonna thrust a blanket over them, and that's the symbol of that. I never really understood that in any movies or shows or anything. And I've never really seen it in anywhere in real life where after anybody's really had a tough day, here's a blanket. No, that doesn't logically happen. But it continues to happen in movies and shows, and I just don't get why. Maybe there was just some point where we can break that down why that happens. But anyways, let's push on here. So as Han is telling Luke to get back into the Falcon, and also Ben, through his spirit, is telling Luke, wait. Oh, I messed something up here. was to go on and tell Vader that if Vader strikes him down, he'll become more powerful than he'd ever imagined. Yeah, because Ben will go on and have learned the power of being able to be a Force ghost. So that's I missed that part. My bad. Because yeah, later on Ben will become a Force ghost, and eventually so will other people like Yodas and all these and Anakin's and all these other uh, ghost people. But anyways, so Luke is being told by Ben to get back onto the ship, and so he does. And here's where Leia is to comfort Luke, and here's where Han and Chewie are like, well, hopefully Ben took care of all those beacons, or we're not going to have a really long trip here. So they scramble out of there, and all of a sudden they realize they're being followed by X-wings, TIE fighters. My bad. So I knew at some point I was going to get TIE wings and or TIE fighters and X-wings confused, because in my mind, bizarrely, it's like brown and gray. I get like things kind of tweakingly confused, and I always got X-wings and TIE fighters always confused, even though they're the good guy and the bad guy. It's very easy to confuse them in my mind for some reason. So, so Chewie goes over and takes on the flying, while both Han and Luke get to the gunner station, because Han tells Luke that it isn't over yet, and they need to get to the gun station to take out the TIE fighters. So Luke goes on and calls out that they're coming in too fast, but then there is smoke coming into the Falcon, and Han is telling people that the ship will hold up, and then he's desperately hoping that the ship will hold up. Like, you hearing me? You hear me, baby? Stay together. So Luke starts to go on and starts honing in on where the TIE fighters are, and whenever Luke celebrates, it's like, well, hey man, like, this isn't over yet. Like, come on, like, let's don't get too cocky. I think in Blue Harvest, the Family Guy thing, they say, hey, don't get too penisy. It's kind of funny. So they go on to explain how there's 2 TIE fighters left, and eventually both Han and Luke take them out. And they celebrate while also C-3PO is in a weird bit of wire rubble, and he's saying to R2 how he's melting. So now we cut to Vader and the Falcon has made its jump to hyperspace, and luckily they kept a homing beacon on the Falcon so they can track it anyways, because it is a very smart move. But Tarkin is hoping that whatever they do next is going to work, because this is very risky by them going to Dantooine to not only face off against the Millennium Falcon, but who knows what else. So so here is when both Leia and Han are like, Leia is kind of contemplating Han by getting them out of there. Han is to just kind of be amazed at his own skill and genius. So Leia goes on and talks about the R2 information that she's extracting, and so I'm trying to think how to cut my way through this part. And Han goes on and says all he's doing here is for the money and nothing else. And Leia goes on and says, like, well, if money is all that you love, that's all that you will receive. So Leia goes on and she leaves, and then Luke goes on and asks Han, it's like, well, what do you think of her? And Han is like, well, yeah, she's gotten a lot of spirit. And Han, I think, goes on and asks, like, wait, do you think a girl like that would be interested in a guy like me? It's like, no. No. So, now we cut to Dantooine, and very specifically, Dantooine, that is to actually be, uh, give me a second here. Where is it? Seriously? I know it's something for. Yamen for. Um, oh, wait a minute. Um, uh, Temple for in the western part of National Park of. No, wait. Let me pause here for a second. Yavin for. Yavin for. So they make their way to the rebel base, and immediately Princess Leia is to be met by some commander, where she goes on and talks about the plans. And so Tarkin and Vader are talking about the planet they're making their way to, which is Yavin, and how they're going to be orbiting the planet soon. Here is where we have a man by the name of General Jane that is going on and talking about the plans, about the Death Star's weakness, the exhaust port, and eventually how they're going to have to go on and make this run to try and be able to get into this hole that's like 2 meters wide. And Luke goes on and says, like, well, yeah, I think I can go on and I think I can nail something like that. Like at home, we'd go on to do stuff like that all the time. And I think at one point they even have kind of Wedge kind of chiming in for a little bit of a line here. I think Wedge goes on and I think mentions about how this would be impossible even for a computer. And here's where Luke goes and says, like, no, we can do that. Like, that sounds very reasonable. So if anything, he's shot in things even bigger than 2 meters. So if anything, for him, he'll be able to nail it. So Vader and Tarkin are mentioning about how the Rebel base is 30 meters away, and now that they seem to have gone on and ended Kenobi, that it's finally time to end the rebellion. So Luke goes on now with his pilot gear on, which honestly, it's so cool that they kept this visual throughout other Star Wars things and they didn't shift and change it all the time. Yeah, like in episodes 1, 2, and 3, we have a whole different set of imagery there, but for the most part, I think. But in these movies and then like Mandalorians and all these other stuff, they kind of kept the more iconic imagery of Star Wars to the best of the abilities of that. Um, except for, of course, in Kenobi, where it's like going back to like right before um, Episode 4. So there's kind of a little bit of kind of give and take there. So Luke makes his way to Han and is asking if he's going to go on and come with them on this run. And Han is like, no, like I've got my money, I'm going to live to spend it. And Luke is just kind of disappointed. And so uh so Luke goes and speaks to Leia about his disappointment with Han, and and hoping that Luke, with all the interactions that he had with Han, maybe there was somewhere in there where he could have gone on and kind of changed Han to realize that, like, well, hey, this time around I should go on, I should help these people out, because it seems like the right thing to do. No, not with Han. Until we get the whole big, huge surprise. So, Leia's going to go on and say that Han is going to go on and make his own path, and they have to choose their own. And Luke was also hoping that, man, if only Ben would be here, like, what could he be saying to Luke now? And Ben is always there. Like, Ben will go on and say to Luke, it's like, well, yeah, like I will be always there for you, Luke, as well as also, like, may the Force always be with you, always. So Luke goes on and makes his way to his X-Wing, where he meets up with Biggs, an old friend of his who had gone on to be at the farm, which he references that Biggs and Tank were to have left. So they're kind of two guys just kind of catching up here. All of a sudden, as Luke and Biggs are just talking about old times, we all of a sudden have a guy named Garvin that comes in, that I don't know where I am to go on and see him past this certain point. I can't figure that out. So, but Garvin starts to go on and asks about kind of Luke's qualifications, and Biggs is like, oh, no, Luke, like this guy will easily be able to do whatever you need him to do. Like definitely you can count on him. And so if anything, Biggs is like, well, yeah, like, if anything, we need to focus on this now. If anything, we'll take our stories and tell them later. So Luke goes on and tells Biggs, it's like, well, yeah, I told you I was going to be here one day. And Biggs is like, yeah, like, it's crazy. So, so Luke goes on and gets into his X-Wing, and the mechanics are going on and saying how maybe Luke should not go on and have this R2 in his X-Wing. And Luke is like, no, like, me and this R2 unit have been through a lot together, and so yeah, we're definitely gonna go on and we're gonna stay together. So even C-3PO is telling R2, it's like, well, hey, like you'll come back, R2, right? Or otherwise my life is gonna be a lot more boring without you in it. And so as Luke eventually takes off here, here's where Ben starts talking to him. So, in what I would just call the war room at this point, where Leia, C-3PO, and a number of other kind of people are kind of manning everything to be the Rebel Alliance, to explain what everything's going on, going through the radar, explaining that the Death Star is making its way to the X-Wings. So, all right. So now we have the Red Squadron. It seems that, if anything, the one that seems to be leading the squadron the longest is a guy named Gavin. Not Garvin, Gavin. So Gavin goes on and tells everybody to get into their attack positions, and as everybody's to be shocked about the size of the Death Star, and like at first, how they all go into eventually in the Death Star is much slower. But eventually, when Luke starts to go on his rounds of attacks, he says that speed is the key. That they need to get going as fast as possible, so they die less. And one of the squad is going on and telling Luke, it's like, well, hey, do you think we're gonna pull out in time? And Luke is like, well, yeah, like we have to, figure out a way to pull out in time because we have to just use the speed to make more runs because we're not gonna hit this just so easily. So at some point, Luke ends up almost getting his ship kind of attacked here, but it only had gotten him burnt a little bit. So now that they know the fighters have made their way to the Death Star, Vader is going on with his own squad uh, to eventually deploy some ships so they can go on and start taking out the Rebel Alliance or the X-wings. So so at one point we start to see people getting killed. Eventually, as the uh, uh, um, I think as we start to see some X-wings come or TIE wings, or as soon as we start to see some TIE fighters coming in, immediately we have, I think, Porkins who ends up going down here as he starts to get into trouble. He loses control, and then everything starts to explode and crash. Uh, at one point, one of the ties are following Luke, and so Luke is trying to figure out where exactly it is, and he got hit but not bad, and also Luke is trying to get our 2 unit to fix whatever the issue is. Uh, Eventually, the more that Luke is getting followed, he can't figure out a way to shake the threat that's behind him, which is the TIE wing. So Luke is desperately calling out for Biggs, and it seems that the goal leader starts swooping in to start helping out. And so, right after the gold squadron starts coming in, here's where they start going into their run. And each one of the gold squadrons all have Y wings. And we have one of the gold squadron members that goes on and has this like pattern of just like of repetitiously just stay on target, stay on target. So further, as the Y wings try to go for their run and are focusing on the target, there of course is a number of X-wings that come from behind them, and Darth Vader is manning one of them. Uh, so all the X-wings all get taken out, and so we have at one point that one of the men come to Tarkin, and here's where they go on and they ask him, it's like, well, hey, sir, like, we could probably go on and lose this battle. Would you like a ship? And Tarkin is like, and in our moment of triumph, you want me to try to escape? No. Like, we're gonna win this. So so Gavin gets everyone together and starts their run with the X-wings. Uh, and so I think Gavin is to be the one that tries, and he does not hit it. It doesn't go in, and then he flies off. Shortly thereafter, that I think Gavin ends up uh, getting killed. Shortly thereafter, that um, uh, yeah, or yeah, I think something happens with his engines or something like that, which kind of takes him out, and then he gets, I think, killed shortly thereafter. That so Gavin goes on and tells Luke to kind of get set up for their run. And so here's where Luke goes on and says, like, hey, speed is key here. We have to go like a bat out of hell as quickly as we can. And here's where Biggs asks Luke, do you think we'll get out in time? Uh, and Luke is to say, it's like, well, hey, I used to do this all the time at home. We'll be able to do the exact same thing here. So Biggs and eventually Wedge is going to try as best they can to try to cover Luke as he's trying to get to this run. And Wedge is even asking Luke if the computer can even hit it. And so eventually Wedge, he ends up getting hit but not completely killed here. He ends up just getting sidelined, and eventually he's okay. I think at some point in Star Wars movies later, we get to see him again, and then people are like, "Oh my God, who's that iconic man?" It's Wedge because he's still alive. Because also, I think he's related to Ewan McGregor, and so like at some point, once the Star Wars movies were kind of to be um, having Wedge coming back, like they immediately had a picture that surfaced with Wedge and Ewan McGregor. It's like, hey, look, they're family members. Woo! Yeah, like because yeah, you might as well just be like, yeah, it's cool that Wedge was to have gone on into this Star Wars series as well as also Ewan McGregor at some point. I think also so did Ewan McGregor's wife, maybe. Not quite sure about that information. You have to correct me. So yeah, one of the shows or something. Don't know. Um, Book of Boba Fett or somewhere in there. You guys can correct me in the comments below. Anyways, uh, so since Wedge ends up getting uh kind of pushed off the side, eventually Luke is needing to try to make this run, and I think it becomes that Luke is to be the only one left. I think Biggs also gets killed, and as Luke is to start to use his targeting system, Ben keeps talking and say, "Hey, trust me, you won't need it." And Luke goes on and takes his targeting system down, and or targeting computer down. And the Rebel Alliance is calling him and asking him why he's doing it and if there's something wrong with his computer. And he's like, "No, I'm all right." So Luke is to make his run, and as Vader is getting ever so close to trying to target Luke, eventually, like at some point, Vader is like, "Yeah, the Force is strong with this one." So as soon as Vader does go on and lock on, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here's the Millennium Falcon that comes in, and we have Han over the the mic that says, "You're all clear, kid. Now it's time to blow this thing and go home." So Luke goes on, hits it perfectly, gets out of there. The Death Star blows, and Han goes on and congratulates Luke for the great shot, and it was one of a million. And of course it was, because yeah, it's super hard for anybody to get that out of the number of tries that they attempted. After the Falcon goes on and attacks Vader, Vader is the only one that seems to exist off of his TIE fighters as he's flying into space, to where eventually he course corrects and then flies off. So Luke makes it back to the Rebel base and immediately sees Han, grabs and hugs him, and Luke is like, "Yeah, I knew you were in it for more than just the award." And so all of a sudden R2D2 comes down, and so R2 is very damaged. C3PO is willing to donate any parts to fix R2D2, and now, whew, we're almost there. We're almost home. So shortly thereafter this, they go on, they make their way to a formal ceremony where they're getting the Medals of Bravery, besides Chewbacca, which is a disgrace, because he can drive the car, but he can't go on and he can't get a medal. He can drive the family car, but he can't get a medal. It's seemingly what the Chewbacca guy says himself at some point when he used to kind of just be upset about the ending of the movie. But the Chewbacca actor goes on an it's a trap. The Chewbacca actor goes on and explains how he did get the last line in the first Star Wars movie. So that's his claim, that if anything, if he didn't get an award, that he did at least get that. Because no one else said anything. We just have Leia just looking all coy, like, who's going to get the award? And then she hands it all to these guys. And they're like, yeah, we have an award. Who cares about this? Weirdly enough, I don't ever remember anybody else getting awards like that in any other ceremony. Am I wrong about that? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe they did that in the animated stuff, but I don't remember that happening in any of the other films. I guess that was maybe just a one-off thing. But either way, I think I'm going to go on and get the heck out of here. This one, I don't think was really difficult. It was just like, man, there was so much information, I have to say. So yeah, but I'm going to try to get the heck out of here, realizing how much to almost 3 hours that this is. And yeah, this is going to be a long one. Plus also the whole preemptive thing of me going on to say everything that's going on in this movie in the beginning. Yeah, this one was a big one. Hopefully I'll go on and be able to get this one out and then try to re-get to another one out here quickly, because this is almost kind of midday. Yeah, I think I'll have enough time to figure out another project and be able to get that out, so that's good. Because I'm trying to rush these out, because I'm kind of doing them on the day, because I couldn't get this one out for how difficult it was. All the information that I needed to research and get together. So yeah, this one was to be difficult, but hopefully I can go on and do a lot easier ones soon. So it can have me get these out a little bit faster, a little bit quicker. But ultimately, I'm still trying to not to have to put too much on myself. But also, I'm trying to get to these bigger title things, and I know that's going to be very challenging. But also, there might be a lot of people that don't have real true interest in this stuff because of it just being like, oh, obviously, these are great films. Like, why should I even bother? I understand that, but I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy, because I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying my best to find anything out there, and finally do something new in the channel instead of just going back over the same old stuff, like this, and like projects that I will be planning after this, except for I plan on doing Batman 89. I already done that before, but I don't care. I'm going to just put it over here and just do it as a new thing. I plan on also going on and doing sequels of stuff that I already started. Because I know that those are kind of possibly some big titles, maybe uh, for for the channel. Also, I'm obviously going to try to get into Captain America's and Marvel stuff and superhero things. But also, I probably want to get to some cooldown stuff too, because yeah, this is taking a lot out of me. So hopefully, I'll go on. I'll get to some titles that'll give me some easier uh projects. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.